Welcome back to pewterpowers.com, everybody. It is another edition of a Few Extra Bucs, more than a few extra takes on your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I am Mike Nabors. We're going to bring in our voice of reason, Justin Thomas. He's our producer, and our Bucs insider, Roy Cummings. But first, we'd like to thank our title sponsors, House of Brews in Lutz and Sea Dog Brewing Company, 2 locations in Clearwater and Treasure Island on the beach. Great brews, great food, great service. And we're nearing the stretch run of this preseason. One last game, and boy, we can smell the regular season almost a week away when the Bucs open up things against the New Orleans Saints. But a lot to get to. We got a lot of sound following the Bucs' last preseason game against the Detroit Lions. I'm going to bring in our voice of reason, Justin Thomas. Justin, we couldn't do this without you. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are y'all?
We're doing good. Let me bring in Roy Cummings, our Buccaneer insider. Roy, I kind of, I don't know if I'm waffling a little bit, but I used to be a big fan of 4 preseason games. But this preseason game, maybe it's that the Buccaneers are better than they used to be, and there's not as many battles. We pretty much know the roster. But what's your take on preseason game number 4, having 4 preseason games?
From a media perspective, it's always been the hardest game to follow, write about, find anything interesting in it. Unless there's like one position battle that where someone, you try to focus on somebody who is on the bubble and has a real chance to make the team, and that's kind of how you look at it. But it's hard to watch an entire football game for 1 or 2 guys, even if you're spending the whole game watching, tonight, this time around. I mean, I think, Jack Cichy is a guy that you would look at, that this game means a lot for him, and maybe others like him, Cameron Lynch or Riley Bullock, our friend from last season and
Mr.
stuff.
Hard Knocks.
Yeah, Mr. Hard Knocks, yeah. So it's a hard game to get excited about, even for the most diehard fans. It's even hard for the coaches and GMs, really, because at the end of the day, Jason Light said today, out of the 53 players they know who they're going to keep, they know all but about maybe 2 or 3 of them. And those 2 or 3 guys, by the way, are probably going to change at some point in the first week, maybe even 2 weeks before, once the season starts. Between now and the start of the season, those guys may not even be on the team because somebody else is going to become available to another team, and they're going to take advantage of that, and they're going to try to make moves to bring those guys on board. So it's really a weird kind of time. It's really a time when you really, really wish more than ever that there were only 2 preseason games. We could just get started on the regular season. And it's that way for the players, too. I can promise you that.
Roy, who I always feel sorry for in a game like this is Gene Deckerhoff. Can you imagine doing play-by-play in a game like this? Not only do you have all these moving parts on the team or you're supposed to know, but the other team, too. I mean, there's so many players that play in this game.
Yeah, it's hard for – I got to think it's hard for Gene Deckerhoff to get get excited about this one. But, hey, he calls them all as best he can. He's a pro. He finds a way to make even a game like this exciting. And you know what? One thing that they have the benefit of is they're going to sit down with the coaching staff and with the GM, beforehand, and they're going to know exactly, who's fighting for a roster spot, who's got a chance to make an impact, and that helps them along. But it's a game that you really just kind of can't wait to get through.
Yeah, I had a chance to go to practice this week, and I asked Dirk Koetter about the talent on this football team compared to past years, and here's what he had to say. Dirk, you've had a lot of pieces since you've been a head coach here. Is this football team harder to make than it was 3 years ago, or can you compare? Can you compare that at all?
You really don't think of it like that. I mean, you just think of right now. So, I mean, if we really went back and looked at it, and then the other thing is, all positions are different. Some positions are better than others right now. And injuries always factor into it, where we're thin and when we're not. So, I mean, we definitely have a more talented team at the top, and at some positions, definitely harder.
You kind of came around at the end there, but I think there's no doubt about it, Roy, that this is Dirk Koetter's best roster and the toughest football team to make since he's been the head coach.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it just kind of naturally progresses that way when you've been in the situation the Bucs are in, where you've had some premium draft picks. You've done a good job of trading for players or trading for extra picks on draft day, which they've done. You've done a pretty good job in free agency, which I think they've done. consistently over the, more often than not, they hit on the right guy. Everybody wants to, criticize free agency for the guys that miss, but they forget about the guys who made it, like a Brent Grimes. He's not new. He's been here now for 3 years. So that goes back 3 free agency periods ago where they signed a guy like that. And there's several like that. Chris Conte's another one. He's been around for a while now, and he's a darn good football player. And people who think he's not just don't know the game of football. And I challenge anyone to take me on that. Dirk Koetter talked about that this week as well. And, but that's where they are. You expect this team to get better because of the premium draft picks they've had. You expect them to get better because they're doing a better job in free agency, in my opinion. And that just makes it harder to find a spot. So, yeah, that's what you want. You want it to be hard to find a spot. You want to have to let go of good players. You want your roster to be that strong that come that final roster pick, somebody says, wow, I can't believe they let that guy go. So that's a sign you're getting better.
Can I change my mind week to week on a podcast? I promise you I won't do it often, but do I have the right to do that, Roy?
Yeah, because I don't know what we're going to talk about anyway, man.
Okay, because last week I said I thought Jameis Winston should play in the 4th preseason game, and you know what? I don't think he should play for a number of reasons. If he gets hurt, that's going to cost the Bucs a lot of money, and he's not going to be throwing to the guys he's going to need reps with, throwing with. So I thought that was a good move that the Bucs aren't going to play him in this game. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I never thought it was really I didn't think it was going to happen to begin with. I'm not surprised that he's going to sit it out. You have to remember, Jameis Winston is your number 1 quarterback. He's at the top of the depth chart. If you're at the top of the depth chart with this football team, you're more than likely not going to play. The only reason you would play is if you've gone through the first 3 preseason games and gotten no snaps or virtually no snaps. For a guy like that, Vernon Hargreaves is an example. There's a guy who may play a little bit this weekend, or Thursday night, I should say, because he hasn't had a lot of snaps. He missed some time in training camp, missed some time in the preseason. He's a guy who could get some snaps, but they're not going to throw Brent Grimes out there. They're not going to throw DeMar Dotson out there. They're not going to throw Ryan Jensen out there. Those guys are established players. They know how to get ready for the season. They don't need a dozen extra snaps or 24 snaps or even 2 snaps in this particular preseason game to get ready for the start of the season. So Jameis Winston falls into that category. He's your number 1 quarterback. You wouldn't normally play him in a game like this. These are not necessarily normal circumstances, but he's not going to gain much by playing in this preseason game. Therefore, there's more of a risk than there is a reward to be gained from this situation. So no, you hold him out.
What do you think about these guys, though? What do you think about a Ronald Jones who needs more playing time, or an MJ Stewart who is hurt? He probably won't play because of that reason, or a Carlton Davis who has had obviously a great preseason but needs more snaps. Do you think guys like that who are great prospects, but you certainly don't want to, and you don't want anybody to get hurt, but you don't want those guys to get hurt, but they need snaps? What about guys like Ronald Jones, MJ Stewart, Carlton Davis?
I think rookies need to play in this game because it's against a bunch of other rookies. It's a lot like going to the Senior Bowl or something and watching guys work there. So it's an opportunity to see them against what are truly their peers, NFL caliber players who are trying to fight for a roster spot. Look, MJ Stewart has nothing secured. I mean, yes, he's going to make the roster, but beyond that, there's nothing secured. His the amount of playing time he's going to get probably isn't set yet. Where he's going to play isn't set yet. He needs all the snaps he can get, outside corner, inside corner, maybe even a little bit of safety. Same with Carlton Davis. Certainly Ronald Jones needs to play. I'll be surprised if those guys don't get extensive time in this game because they need the opportunity, because there's a real good chance that Ronald Jones, Carlton Davis, MJ Stewart, if everything goes the way the Bucs want it to, those guys won't be playing as much as everybody thinks they will come the start of the regular season. But that depends on injuries and how they're performing in practice. So, now's a perfect time to see how those guys have done throughout the course of the preseason in terms of getting themselves ready. They still need some snaps. So, yeah, I would expect to see them play this game.
Yeah, I do too. Let's talk about an intriguing position on this football team. You're really top heavy, and it's your strongest position is wide receiver. May have the best group of guys in the NFL. I mean, from Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, Chris Godwin, Adam Humphries. And then you have a battle after that. And, there's a lot of guys fighting for those last couple roster spots at wide receiver. You have Justin Watson, the rookie who's looked good in training camp, Bobo Wilson, Freddie Martino, Bernard Reedy. I had a chance to visit with Bucs rookie wide receiver Justin Watson, who I was really impressed with after Tuesday's practice. He spent about 40 minutes after practice catching balls and just staying late. And he came off the practice field, and I asked him about that. I just saw you, last guy off the field with fourth-stringer Austin Allen, the quarterback. That's been a priority for you this camp, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's something I took pride in college. Being a leader and an older guy in college, just being the last one out there, and it's just kind of been a part of my routine. And as a rookie, just showing everyone in this organization that I'm ready and willing to work.
How about that, Roy Cummings? I know you're always the last guy out of the press box, but pretty impressive stuff from that rookie, right?
Yeah, it is. I like that this is something he did in college. Look, it worked for him in college. It's going to work for him here. When you're a player like Justin Watson, you have to figure out a way to make the team take notice of you. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You obviously can do it on the field, and you can do it sometimes by being the last guy off the field and just showing everybody that, your work ethic is second to none. And sometimes that's what pushes, guys onto a roster. If everything is even between two players, for example, at a position, and you see one guy, everything's even in terms of their ability, their skill set, their performance up to this point. And you see one guy who's out there always trying to get better, and another guy who's, I don't know, maybe quick to get off the field or doesn't hang around that much, isn't really working to be a leader, doesn't maybe blend with the guys as much. You're probably going to take the guy who works a little bit harder and is trying to become more than just a good player on the field, someone who's trying to, take on some leadership responsibilities and things like that. So I think it's important. I think it's a good move on his part. I think it's a way to make the team. And my guess is that he's going to be one of those guys who gets a lot of playing time this week because he needs it, because he's got a chance of making this team. And if he doesn't, he's got a chance of becoming a practice squad guy. And if he doesn't make that, he's got a real good chance of being one of the first guys called when an injury does occur at that position. So he's a guy that, impressions can last a long time. And we saw it happen this week. Dante Dye was called up this week by the Buccaneers. He was sitting at home waiting for a call. Hadn't been in the NFL for a while now. Has been with the Bucs a couple of different times. And he's always been a bubble guy. And he got a call this week because of some injuries. For guys like that who are fighting for that 53rd spot on the roster or a practice squad spot, you always have to keep fighting. And Justin Watson has already learned that lesson, and I think it's going to serve him well because I think he's going to be rewarded for it in some way here over the course of the next week and a half. He's either going to get himself a roster spot or, as I said earlier, possibly a practice squad position. So good for him. I think his hard work and his skills are going to pay dividends to him. He's going to be very happy here sometime before the start of the season.
You talk about developing work habits. Watching Hard Knocks with the Cleveland Browns, I remember early on, Hugh Jackson took Baker Mayfield aside and was asking him his routine because Tyrod Taylor had a routine. And Baker Mayfield really didn't have a routine. Tyrod Taylor would get there 2 hours early, maybe an hour and a half early, and work out. And then Baker Mayfield, you saw him a few episodes later, develop a routine. He just learned how to be a professional. So it's encouraging to me to see a guy like Justin Watson kind of already have that routine. I asked him after practice today, out of all the veteran receivers on this team, who has helped him the most?
Chris Godwin, actually. I think
wow. Okay.
everyone's been helping me. Mike has been helping me a lot, just playing with my size and using that to my advantage. But, Chris Godwin's the guy that in his second year did a great job last year on special teams in the run game, and then had a nice end of the season catching passes, and it's something that I think I could do this year. So I've just been trying to hold on to him, see what he did last year, and follow that same process.
So if you had to handicap the wide receivers, you kind of broke down a little bit on Justin Watson. I thought that was interesting. Chris Godwin already acting like a veteran. He's only his second year as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. But if you had to handicap these wide receivers right now, who do you think makes the team, Ron?
It's really tough to call, and I think it's going to come down to Thursday night.
Yeah.
Look, we know Mike Evans is on the team. Deshaun Jackson is on the team. Adam Humphries is on the team. The real question is, are they going to keep 5 or 6? I think they keep 6 just because they have that much depth and they don't want to lose some of these guys. I think they keep 6, and I think Justin Watson's going to make it. I think he's going to make it along with Chris Godwin. I think Bobo Wilson has a chance as well. Wouldn't be surprised to see those two guys fight it out for the last spot, and both of them make it at some point. So if they keep 6, so I think there's a real good chance for those guys.
Yeah, you mentioned Bobo Wilson. Yeah, he was kind of exploited somewhat in Hard Knocks last year, but every time Dirk Cutter's asked about Bobo Wilson, he really defends him, and he talks about the whole Hard Knocks scenario is, you're always kind of looking for something when you're Hard Knocks, and we all get that a little bit, but he's gone out of his way to compliment Bobo Wilson, who has looked steady this camp. So, yeah, I think Bobo Wilson, Justin Watson, 2 good candidates to stick around on this football team. Let's talk. You mentioned the linebackers earlier, but Riley Bull is a guy who's had been in a booth the last couple of days, a real popular guy on this team because of his effort, doing a lot of things that Justin Watson's done the last couple of years, and fits well in that locker room. But he may have a hard time making this team, Roy.
Yeah, he may, but he is a guy. What makes him stand out is not his physical ability. It's his mental approach to the game. He's a tremendous leader, number one. Number two, there isn't a thing about this defense he doesn't know. He's one of those guys who's always telling everybody else how to line up, which is part of the job of a middle linebacker. But he is ahead of so many guys fighting for spots, in that regard, that's something that's important. Plus, he plays special teams, and he's a hustler, man. You love guys like that on your team because they kind of show other guys the way. It was interesting. Justin Watson just talked about Chris Godwin and how he helped him. That kind of ability to help younger players, even if they're fighting for your spot, that's something that teams love. And, I think that's something that's going to help Riley Bullock. I think to be honest with you, I think at the end of the day, I think he makes the team along with Cameron Lynch. A lot of those last spots end up going to guys who, in essence, are special teams players. He gets that nod there because he can be a part of that. He could end up on the practice squad, but I think Jack Cichy ends up on the practice squad, and I think Riley Bullock earns a roster spot just like he did late in the season last year. I think he gets in there.
You've talked about Cichy since the draft. I remember we had all our PewterPirates.com specials back then. And when he was drafted, I remember looking back at the entire draft, and he was a guy that he's intrigued you for a while, hasn't he?
Jack Cichy?
Yes.
Yeah, he has. I mean, look, this is a guy who he comes from a football family. He's just one of those football guys. I mean, he's always been a very smart player, really knows the game very well. And he's a kid who, I'll tell you what, I've talked to scouts who told me that had it not been for the injuries that sidelined him for, in essence, the last 2 years at Wisconsin. I mean, he's only played a handful of games over the last couple of years. Were it not for those injuries, his skill set and his smarts would have made him a first or second round draft pick. And I think what the Bucs invested in was the opportunity to just get this kid healthy. He plays a position where we're deep anyway. This is what they're thinking. They're deep there anyway. And again, because you've got behind the Levante Davids and the Quan Alexanders and the Devontae Bonds and guys like that, the Kendall Beckwith, you've got Riley Bullock and Cameron Lynch. So they're deep anyway. He's a guy that they can put on their practice squad and just develop over the next year or two, get him healthy, make sure that he understands the scheme, and then lo and behold, 2 years from now, or worst case scenario, late in the season, if somebody's just hurt and you've had some injuries there, here's a guy you can plug in, and guess what? Chances are he's going to play, a little bit like a season pro right out of the box because he's just that good. So this kid's got real potential to be a steal of this draft. I think he's an exceptional football player. He just needs to be healthy to prove it.
All right, let's talk about a guy who is not going to see any action on Thursday against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that's running back Peyton Barber. We just taped our latest video wrap for the Buccaneers for PewterPirates.com that will be released on Wednesday, and one of the highlights of it is a one-on-one I had with Peyton Barber, very soft-spoken, modest player, but has had an unbelievable offseason and has carried it over to having a great training camp and preseason. In fact, he played so well in the game, the dress rehearsal against the Detroit Lions. Dirk Koetter saw enough after the first drive where he almost had 40 yards rushing and he scored a touchdown. And wisely enough, yanked him, and he didn't see any action after that. I had a chance to talk to Peyton Barber and ask him about a number of topics. First of all, how satisfying is it for him to be a starter after not being a guy who was drafted, had to really earn his way to this position? How satisfying is it for him to be in this position right now? You've had to buy your time. How do you feel like you've matured as a running back that you can handle the lion's share of the load for this football team?
I feel like I've matured in all aspects of my game. Pass protection, running the ball, pretty much everywhere. So.
And I also had a chance to talk to Peyton Barber about, Ronald Jones, a rookie who has struggled this preseason. And, Peyton Barber knows, every player's been there, but how has he tried to help his running back who many thought would give him that nice compliment, but it looks like Peyton Barber, may have to shoulder more of the load. But we talked about Ronald Jones. They draft a running back second round, Ronald Jones, kind of a different change of pace. And you see in New Orleans and a lot of NFL teams, you need the complementary running back. How do you feel like he's coming along? I know he's had some rookie rough spots, as everybody does. I'm sure you try to help him along the way a little bit too.
Most definitely. I try to help him as if I was trying to help myself. He's a lot further along than I was my rookie year. So I know Ronald is definitely, he's a special back.
What do you think, Roy, long term? I know it's really early, but it obviously looks like Peyton Barber is going to get the lion's share of the carries. But do you think long term, Ronald Jones, Peyton Barber, that could be something?
I really do. I mean, I think that's why the Bucs drafted Ronald Jones, is because they do believe that he's going to bring a different dynamic to the running game. He's a home run hitter. That's what he is. What Ronald Jones has to figure out in order to get there is how to get through the line in a hurry the way he did at USC. He's not a guy who can run parallel the line of scrimmage and just, he's not going to work too well, I think, in a zone scheme. I think he's got to be a guy who just hits the hole quickly, hits it hard, slashes through there and gets in open space, because that's when he takes off. So I think that opportunity is going to come. He's just got to find his comfort level in the league. It takes a little bit longer for guys sometimes to figure that part out, and I think he will. He'll develop a comfort zone. He'll get there, and when he does, because the skill set's exceptional, it really is. And he's, as I said, he's a home run hitting type. That's something the Bucs really don't have right now. And I think along with Peyton Barber, who's a little bit more of a tougher runner, when you think of Peyton Barber, think a little bit of Ernest Graham, former Bucs running back, a one-cut runner, very decisive, but powerful at the same time, quick, but powerful. That's what his role is, and he'll bang out some extra yards after contact, and make it tough to tackle you. So they're two different style runners, and that's why I think they both will work very well together in the same backfield, complementing each other and splitting the carries. I think that's the game plan going forward. And as soon as Ronald Jones finds his comfort level in the league, that's what they'll be doing with those guys.
Roy, you've been on the Peyton Barber bandwagon for a long time. The whole offseason training camp, you talked about him, and you really couldn't ask for better. Off-season and training camp for Peyton Barber. What do you see from him? I mean, he had such a great stretch run last year as well. I mean, it kind of coincided with Jameis Winston playing well. How important is this guy to this football team? I mean, we've talked about the wide receivers, the tight ends. We've talked about the quarterbacks ad nauseum in these podcasts. Boy, if you get some nice contributions from Peyton Barber, that changes the complexion of this football team.
Well, it really does. And here's the thing. The Buccaneers want to run the ball. Sure, they're a passing team. They've got a lot of weapons in the passing game. But in order to make those passes work in Dirk Koetter's system, you have to be able to run the ball. You have to be able to set up those play-action fakes. Remember who's a quarterback. And this is why this is all important. You have a drop-back quarterback who's got to be a 3 to 5 step guy in Jameis Winston. Doesn't have a real quick release. Is one of those guys who kind of has to set himself up. Needs a little bit of that extra second to get into his rhythm and throw the ball. Same with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Not a real quick release kind of guy. In order to do that, plus don't forget the routes that they run are deep routes. It's a 3 vertical system, like what BYU used to run back in the day. It's a 3 vertical system, and those routes take time to develop. So you've got to go back 3 steps, 5 steps, and in order to make that work, what you've got to have in front of that is someone biting on a play action fake, and that's why the running game is important, so that you can stay in. First of all, you don't want 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14. You want 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3 and 3rd and 5. So in order to make that happen, you have to be able to run the ball on the early downs. You have to set up the opportunity for linebackers and safeties to bite on those play action fakes to give you that split second of time that's needed for those routes to develop and for the quarterback to get into his delivery and deliver the ball. So the running game is very important to this team. They want to be balanced. They need it for the passing game to work, just from a technical standpoint. So there's a lot on Peyton Barber's shoulders. Ronald Jones too. There's a lot on their shoulders. They are very important players to this team, because this team at the end of the day needs to be balanced in how it approaches moving the football.
That was a good breakdown. You had everything but a Lavelle Edwards reference when breaking down the old BYU formations there.
Right. That's the man.
That's right. All right. Well, listen, we're wrapping up, but we cannot wrap it up without our 3 and Out segment. It's time, Justin. Yeah. 3 and we're out of here. Roy Cummings has not seen the questions, and he always delivers. Expert analysis like he just gave us there with the wide receivers and all the alignments on this Buccaneer offense. Okay, 3 questions and we're out of here. Number 1, Roy, you've covered this football team for a long time. In your recollection of battles to make the Buccaneers, what was the toughest battle you remember?
Oh, boy.
How about that?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, man. Son of a gun.
Did I stump you finally?
Yeah, you've stumped me there. Wow. I don't have an answer.
It doesn't have to be toughest. Maybe one that you remember thinking, man, I'm not sure who's going to make this, or I was just one that stood out for you. Maybe you were surprised a guy made the football team, or I don't know. I know you've covered a lot of training camp. Maybe
this is not the best answer because I would need time to really go back and think about it. But you know what? I was a little surprised that Jeremy McNichols got let go last year. I know he had a rough, and that's not a good answer, I said, but
people were surprised.
I got to be honest. Most of the time, you can read the roster. Seldom do guys get cut that you don't expect not to get cut. That's the thing I can tell you from my years of experience is seldom does someone get cut that I don't expect to get cut. But I was a little surprised to see Jeremy McNichols get let go the way he was last year because I thought where they drafted him, they could have put him on the practice squad, could have held on to him, and could have said, hey, there's an opportunity here. You just got to figure things out. But they decided on Jeremy McNichols last year that this kid's just not cut out for the NFL, at least at our level. And so that was a surprise. Now, again, I don't think that's the best answer, but
how about when Brad Culpepper was cut?
No, saw it coming.
Really?
I got to be honest. Most of the guys whose names that you'll throw out there and hey, remember when he got cut? I was like, yeah, I remember it. We knew it was coming. It was because to me, the job of the general manager, you've got to know when a guy has pretty much hit the wall,
right?
And when to move on. Look, I was surprised that John Lynch got let go, that Warren Sapp got let go, but I could see why the team did it at the time. Derek Brooks, that was surprising. There's been a few that you kind of, you raise an eyebrow. But again,
but you know what, Roy? Out of all those moves, frankly, the only one that didn't really, make sense in the long run was John Lynch because Sapp and Brooks were done at that point. John Lynch had some Pro Bowl seasons. To me, out of those 3, Lynch was the bad move, but the others were back to your point. That was the time to let those guys go. As hard as it was time.
Yeah, it was like when Hardy Nickerson got let go. A lot of people said they let him go a year early. Well, maybe they did, but they knew that a year from now, it was going to be costly for him. And when the job of scouts and general managers is to know exactly when the time is right to let a veteran in particular go. And it's tough to do. It was tough to do with Derek Brooks, but by the way, Derek Brooks really never got the calls he was looking for the opportunity he wanted. I know he didn't want to move either, but there were some opportunities for him, but they weren't really starting opportunities. So everybody else could see as well that he was pretty much done. And if he didn't fit into a Tampa 2 scheme, he probably wasn't going to excel. So, I've seldom been surprised by these moves.
All right, our second question in our 3, and we're out of here. Des Bryant. Oh, Des Bryant. He's the flavor of the month this preseason. We saw him Hard Knocks. Boy, I thought he was just going to take over Hard Knocks walking through the hallways there. If you were a general manager in this league, let's say, I guess it has to be the right fit, but let's just say you're the GM in Cleveland. Do you sign Des Bryant?
No, I don't. Here's why. I don't look. If I'm Cleveland, I don't, because in Cleveland, he becomes a distraction, and not a good one. He becomes a distraction because I don't think he's going to be happy in Cleveland because Cleveland's not ready to win.
Right.
In Jacksonville, I think about it because Marquise Lee is gone. You're hurt at an important position. This guy could come in and make you better. But the problem is he only plays one position. He's an X-receiver. If you've got an X-receiver, you don't want this guy. Because if you've got an X-receiver, which is the top receiving spot, that's the number one guy on the outside. If you've got that guy, he's going to gripe and moan because he thinks he should be playing ahead of the guy you got, no matter who the guy you got is. So
I think he's going to gripe and moan over
right.
something. He's going to find something to gripe and moan about.
The only way I sign Des Bryant is if I honestly think that I've got a chance at going deep into the playoffs, and I absolutely need a receiver, a la Jacksonville. I think that's a team that should think about it. But if at the end of the day they're afraid that he's going to disrupt the chemistry in that locker room, you can't do it. And you've got to be a strong locker room like the Cowboys were, with enough other personality so that when he goes off on a tangent or goes or does a riff or whatever it might be, it's not the most noticed thing in the room. It's got to be that way. If he is in Jacksonville, it could be that way. So you got to have a lot of talks with him. You got to make sure that he's on board with the team system. Everything else, it's just a tough call. I mean, a lot of players put themselves in these positions where they're just not wanted because they become too much of a problem, and that's where Des Bryant is.
Shouldn't he be in New England? I mean, Randy Moss did work for him in New England. Randy Moss and Des Bryant, to me, are cut out of the same cloth. You don't think New England?
Nope. Look, it wouldn't surprise me if Bill Belichick brought him in if they needed him, but it wouldn't surprise me if they don't either, because you know what? They're just not going to go get any talented player. He's got to be the right player. He's got to be the right fit in that room. That's what's most important to Bill Belichick. And Bill Belichick knows exactly how he's running his football team, what players are needed to do on every single down. If he's going to go get a guy like Des Bryant's going to have to know that this is your role, and if you can't accept this role, then I can't have you as part of this team. And that role may be, 28 snaps a game, backing up somebody, and it could be 42 snaps a game being the starter. But if he's not willing to play the role, whatever it is, Belichick's not going to bring him in.
Interesting. All right, my last one. I've been tough on you today. Yeah, I threw some tough ones at you, but I'm going to end with the fastball, like hopefully I do every week. If you could pick one Beatle, all right, on your football team, and you were taking sides, and you had to pick one of four, it's like you're on the playground. Which Beatle is the first round pick for Roy Cummings?
I'm going to take John Lennon because as a kid he was tough.
Yeah?
He was a bit of a fighter. Yeah, he was willing to fight you when he was a kid. He grew out of that, but he was a little bit of a fighter as a kid. So I'll take the kid. I'll take the guy with the fight in him.
All right, give me the order after John Lennon then.
Then Paul, then George, then Ringo. Paul for his versatility.
Oh, Ringo's last.
Ringo's last in this one.
Right.
George, because he'll fly under the radar and do everything you ask him to do,
Right.
and he won't make any noise about it.
He's the Justin Watson of the Beatles.
Well, you know who he is? He's the Adam Humphries of the Beatles.
Okay.
Or the Adam Humphries of the Bucs. That's what he would be. He's like Adam Humphries. He flies under the radar, does a whole lot of great stuff. He's the quiet one.
Right. I got you.
He's the quiet one. And then Ringo, hey man, he keeps a great beat, so he'd be, he'll just keep you moving.
Okay. Well, that's our 3 and out. Justin, this was I think I threw some tough ones at Roy. You have anything else for us? Do we leave anything out?
Look, I think we're all ready for preseason to be over.
Yeah.
But Roy, you've said that many times. Recently, Jerry Jones came out and he advocated getting rid, shaving off 2 preseason games and extending the regular season to 18. Do y'all think that's something that NFL would go for? You think there's a possibility there for that?
I do. I think it's going to come. I think
I
the
don't
day
think
will
the
come.
NFL wants any more games. You think so? Go ahead.
Well, I think. Well, you know what? You know when they'll do it? They'll do it when they can figure out a way to monetize it in a way that makes sense for the NFL. Look, there's no doubt. Nobody pays attention to the last preseason game. All right, it's hard to probably get advertisers for that. I don't know if there's a national game on this week, so you're losing money there. All right, or you're not losing money. You're making money because you're not paying the players yet. But the opportunities there to make more money off of that game, and there's more money to be made off, say, a second preseason games. Look, you and I saw it, Mike, at the game the other night. The third preseason, that all-important third preseason game. Granted, it rained, but there was nobody there. They weren't making any money off parking or concessions or anything like that. That's a lot of money to be made, and it wasn't made. If that was a regular season game, there would have been, well, it's the Bucs, so there would have been 38,000 fans in the stadium. But if it was another team, there would have been 65,000 people in the stands. They would have been making millions of dollars off beers and hot dogs and stuff, and it would have been a moneymaker.
You got to think, though, that they would have to add another bye week, though. If they,
yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah,
but you know when the bye week should be?
What?
I think the bye week should be the second bye week. It's natural. The second bye week should come at Christmas. Take off the week of Christmas. Everybody take off the week of Christmas. Let the players go home, be with their families. Same with the coaches. It's right before the playoffs. Gives everybody a chance to re-energize just before the last 1 or 2 most important games of the season, and for the playoffs. I think it'd be a great idea. Give everybody a second bye week, and everybody shares the bye week, and it's the week of Christmas.
That's not a bad idea.
You're darn right it's not a been proposing that for about 20 years.
Well, especially for a guy that travels back from New Orleans quite a bit and has had to spend a few Christmases there because that NFL schedule the last couple of years was brutal. Yeah, I just think the CTE, the head injuries, I don't know if the union's going to want a lot more in this next CBA to get 18 games. That's going to be quite a battle. But if they cut the preseason, maybe it'll work and you add the bye week. But I just think there's a lot of negotiating that has to be done there.
There is, but I still think it can be done.
I think two bye weeks players would go for that if they extend the season. I could see that.
Oh, I promise they'd go for it. Yeah. They absolutely would. There's no doubt about it. And again, it's I think to me it only makes sense that you do that. I think it's but again, the reason it makes sense is probably why it'll take years for it to happen.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I'll tell you who will love it. The fans will love it, and you know who else will really love it? The fantasy football geeks out there, because the playoffs will be longer, the season will be longer. I mean, it's just better for the NFL. You just got to get the players on board, but I mean, it's a no-brainer for the fans to love this. Yeah. Because they don't like the preseason anyway, and they get more of what they want.
Yeah, I think everybody wins that way, including the players. And look, the players win because they'll expand the rosters a little bit, which I think has to happen by maybe 3-4 games, or they make the taxi squad, the practice squad, an extension of the active roster, somebody that you can bring on a Sunday if you need to or whatever, in some form or fashion. So I think it's going to happen anyway. The reason I think it's going to happen is because everybody benefits from it.
Well, good stuff. Justin Thomas, the voice of reason, with a much better question at the end than any of my 3 and outs. So I appreciate that. But Justin, I appreciate it. Roy, I'm going to talk to you after the all-important, huge, gigantic game against Jacksonville on Thursday. We'll have another podcast, and we'll have an extra slice as well. If you log on to pewterpirates.com right after each game in this preseason, Roy Cummings and I have had an extra slice, our extra takes on what has happened in these preseason games. But, partner, I will talk to you soon.
All right. I'll see you on Thursday.
All right. All right. For Justin Thomas and Roy Cummings, our Buccaneer Insider, I am Mike Nabors. We appreciate our title sponsors, House of Brews and Sea Dog Brewing Company. The preseason's almost over. The regular stuff is here. We can't wait. Next week, we are going to effort, and we're going to start this every week in our podcast. We're going to get some perspective from every team the Bucs are playing, the beat writers, some media from the opposition. We'll go behind enemy lines a little bit, and we'll get some insight from them as well. We anticipate on doing that with the New Orleans press next week. Well, that's another rendition of A Few Extra Bucs. We appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe to pewterpirates.com. A lot of new stuff we've had in training camp. We plan on continuing and adding more during the regular season. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.